All right, people, welcome back to Paperboy Ventures Deals. I'm Kyle, your host and founder of Paperboy, and this is episode 3 of season 4. Quick refresher, season 4 is different from our first 3 seasons as we're now investing directly in every brand and founder that we bring on the pod. We're making these investments out of Paperboy Fund 1, our debut venture fund. Today's episode features Maxine's Heavenly Cookies, a brand known for their delicious, clean label, soft-baked cookie sandwiches. We sit down with founder Robert Petrarca and president Johnny Fayad to uncover the journey thus far and where they're taking the brand this year and beyond. It's a really great episode covering the swings of building in early stage CPG, going vertical to acquire a manufacturer, and finally landing their breakout product after nearly a decade of grinding. But before we get to that, a quick word from our sponsor, Pelagic, the supply chain company. Pelagic is a team of experienced supply chain operators who work alongside emerging CPGs as their businesses grow. They specialize in building systems and scaling efficiently across key parts of the business like product manufacturing, inventory, and 3PL management, as well as general ops advisory. So if you're a founder or CPG ops leader and supply chain is holding you back, Pelagic can help. Reach out to them via their website and tell them Paperboy sent you. All right. Without further ado, introducing Robert and Johnny of Maxine's Heavenly Cookies. Guys, welcome to the pod. Really excited to have you both. And we're here today to talk about your company, Maxine's, the fast-growing cookie brand, just making incredible cookies, just that. So welcome, Robert. Welcome, Johnny.
Thank you for having us. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle.
Amazing. So before we get started, we'll talk through the founding story. And, this is one of those classic 10-year overnight success stories that's actually kind of common in CPG. It takes a long time to really get going and hit your stride. But before we get there, would love if each of you could just talk a little bit about who you are and your role within the company. So Robert, I'll start with you.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Robert. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Maxine's. Have been here since the first cookies were scooped way back when we kind of just started at farmers markets. And so I've pretty much touched every role at this company, especially in the early stages, pretty much did everything. Had a team at one point.
Still doing everything.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say we had a team at one point that was a lot more robust, and then it went back to me doing everything, which is part of the story we'll tell here. But I would say currently I'm back to doing mostly everything and hopefully less each week.
Great. Well, Johnny, I think you're taking some things off of his plate. So welcome to the pod. And who are you?
Yeah. So I started working with Robert a couple of years ago. I used to have a brand that I ran for a number of years and sold that. And then most recently, over the past 5 years or so, mostly been advising founders and investor groups through various stages of their business, mostly in the M&A stage. And a couple of years ago, Robert and I got introduced to help through a different stage of Maxine's. Things eventually started taking off, and little by little, he started roping me into the business more and more to where I've been pretty integrated for the past year in a full-time capacity, just taking off anything I can from Robert's plate, from the most recent fundraise, as well as purchasing a manufacturing facility, which has been a fun journey. I'm sure we'll get into quite a bit here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk through that because that is super rare at this stage of the game in food companies. You don't see too much vertical integration, so we'll get there. But let's throw it back to when this company got started. Robert, I know you were there from the jump. Talk to us about how exactly this came to be. We've got you two on the pod, but there is no Maxine. So who is Maxine? How did this thing get going?
Yeah, she's a real lady, or was a real lady. So we started about 10-ish years ago, a little bit more, very casually selling at farmers markets out of LA. We kind of wandered, my co-founder and I, Tim, we sort of wandered into the business, which I think you either go in very rationally knowing what you're getting into, or you accidentally wander into the business and then discover it and how challenging it can be. That's the path we took. We basically just sold at farmers markets on the weekends in LA. It was a side job, and then kind of grew into delivering cookies to local stores in LA, starting with Erewhon when there was only one location. It's kind of a great entry point for us. So we'd have like real lives during the week, and then on the weekends we'd be selling at farmers markets and driving cookies all over Los Angeles, sitting in traffic to hand deliver like $50 worth of retail cookies. So, and then we kind of decided around 2019 is like you cannot casually have a food business. So that's when we took on some of our first family office capital, and then scaled pretty quickly into retail, and then went through some ups and downs. But Maxine's, just to kind of stay on the origin story. So Maxine was my co-founder's mom, and she had a really delicious recipe that was part of pretty much every experience in life from birth to death. So it was always the cookie of choice that came out when it's like someone was born, when there was a graduation, when there was a family gathering, when there was mourning happening. I mean, these cookies were literally present at everything, and they were a huge part of my co-founder's life. And the idea, and I had a huge sweet tooth, but was always kind of very interested in, and I've always explored like pretty much every health fad that's come in and out. I've just been curious about health as it relates to how you eat and the choices you make as a consumer. So I was always pretty involved and interested in the industry. And so anyway, we basically said, how can we preserve the nostalgia and the memory of this recipe, but have it reflect the values and the things that we were exploring at the time? When we started, it was pretty early in the industry. It's like there were a couple of the early exits, and there was a lot of traction happening in the venture capital world as it started entering into health foods, natural foods, CPG. And at the time, like we were very differentiated, just being a vegan, gluten-free cookie. That was the first starting point that we had, first entry point in the brand differentiation. And I think the thing that was most unique that we thought was like so radical was we were using coconut sugar and dates. You see those more in markets now, but when we started, we were really kind of ahead of the sugar conversation, really just focusing on better unrefined sugars, reading a lot about how processed white sugar is, and then really feeling passionate about alternative sweeteners that could like retain the micronutrients, not be so aggressive on glycemic index, not make you crash after eating them. So, I remember in the early stages, like finding coconut sugar was impossible. It was really, really hard. It's very expensive, but it was a big sticking point for us from a brand. So it was always about, having these two very core pillars, which is preserving this nostalgic recipe, making cookies that tasted like homemade, like they were fresh baked, even though they're shelf stable and lasting on the shelf. And then this other clean component that was always vegan, gluten-free, and sweetened with natural sugars.
Yeah. Robert, I want to get into your personal backstory and how you wandered into this business. Did you come from CPG before you got into the cookie biz?
No.
Or how did did you just enjoy the taste and you knew Maxine personally?
Yeah.
How did you wander into it?
Yeah, I was doing something completely different. So I actually was living in Los Angeles, and I was working in like television production, first as a PA, and then production coordinating, unit production management, kind of worked into the world behind the scenes. And then I had an opportunity and co-founded a live performing arts group in Northern California. So this couldn't be more unrelated to what I'm doing now. But that I always had kind of this entrepreneurial spark. I always wanted to start a business. I think when I was a kid, I was like, we didn't have a lot of money, and I was always like starting a business in our cul-de-sac, like trying to sell things or like have a fair or trying to generate revenue some way for our family so we could like go to Disneyland or do something. So I think I always had a spark for that, and then I had this opportunity to co-found this business in Northern California. I think that really excited in me that desire to start businesses. And I always had a passion for food. I really liked going to grocery stores, walking around. I always would try anything new when it was like keto, when there was like, the lemon cleanse, when people were doing that, when it was like raw diets. I mean, I would always just try something because I'm interested in how that made you feel and how it could essentially improve your life. So those two things having happened kind of set me up for this opportunity to wander into the industry. So when my co-founder, who was in software before this, was like, hey, I've always had this interest in trying to launch this cookie company inspired by my mom's recipe. It was kind of a perfect fit. I was trying to get out of the first business that I had co-founded. I wanted an opportunity in the for-profit space. I really liked consumer. So it was like, all right, let's go and do this together and see what we can learn. And thank God I didn't know too much about it, because I probably would have run the other way.
Cool. And yeah, so for the first 3 years of this, you said you were basically selling at farmers markets, and you were, I don't know, getting feedback, testing the product out. What were the first 3 years like before you raised your first outside capital in 2019?
Yeah, man, it's like you look back and it's like you're nostalgic about it. You're like, oh, the simpler times. But I guess it really wasn't that simple, because it's like we're working full-time jobs, and then like at 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. on a Friday, we'd go like live in a kitchen for like 3 days, going back and forth between a kitchen, waking up at like 5 a.m. for farmers markets and selling cookies, and then driving cookies after the farmers market to retailers. But the feedback loop that you explained, like, that's good. Like, you're interacting with consumers, you're learning like what people say about your products. Now we get that feedback in different ways, because we have more outlets. But then that was the only way to kind of learn, like, do people like this? What don't they like about it? What do they like about it? It was hard, but I would say some of the later years where we had capital and a lot more pressure, like, I would definitely label those as tougher years, because the stakes were higher. It's like, I mean, although it's interesting, at those times you think like, oh my God, we put $10,000 into this, we could lose it all. And now it's like, oh my God, it's like the numbers just get bigger, and the risk and the pressure feels more extreme.
Yeah, the challenges definitely change, and I think that's the necessary evil, or even privilege. Honestly, it is a privilege to be in the seats that we're all in here, building businesses, and it's just the problems always exist. They just change, and the scale tends to grow. Okay, so 2019, that's when you first brought on the outside capital, or the first round. What was the inflection point there? Did you have was there a specific moment that you knew it was time to do that? Like, quit the job, go all in? What was the story there?
I think at some point I just realized you can't casually have a food business. I mean, I think we thought we'll start getting into like 50, 100 stores, and then we can pay ourselves, and our fate will be in our own hands. It's just not the case in consumer. It's very expensive, as you know. It's very, very competitive. Cash does not flow easily, and it's all about volumes and margin. And we had a lot of interest, but we didn't have the margin and the scale, and we didn't have the resources to get there faster. So I pretty early on saw that this is a risk. If we don't get capital behind this, it's like you have to go smaller, or just we might as well walk away. And we had good early traction, especially in the stores that we're in locally in LA. They sold very well. They were pretty differentiated. We had a lot of consumers coming back, good feedback, and we were starting to grow faster and have more interest than we could financially support. So it was a no-brainer at that point. And it's like, got to do the pivot. It's all in, or let it go.
Okay. So you brought on some money then in 2019. We all know what happened in 2020, but can you talk through the next few years of the business? And it sounds like, I don't know if that was when you started hiring your team, and walk us through what those few years looked like.
So interestingly for us, and I think a lot of people around us, 2020 was actually a great year. Johnny has deeper scars in 2020 because he had a business that was really tied to like offices that essentially got annihilated, and he could talk about that. But for us, we actually had an amazing year in 2020. That people were still buying groceries. It really, some of the inflation we started seeing on the grocery shelves hadn't started yet. And the other interesting thing, and the really nice thing that happened in 2020, was like, suddenly e-com was this amazing channel. And I'm not saying it wasn't hard, but you could it felt like at the time you could throw $1 into the meta ad world and like just $10 would come back to you, and you only had to be generally okay at it. I mean, you had to have some strategy, you had to be smart, but it's like things worked better then. And for us, like an e-com channel just built out of nowhere, and we really maintained all the retail distribution, didn't see much inflation. So 2020 was like a banner year for us. And it was actually in 2021 that we ended up raising our first like seed round, and have brought in, one of our first early venture fund groups, Springdale, that came in at that time, and another family office that helped lead a first round. So 2021 was amazing. Built a team. It was like the summer and toward the end of 2021 that the industry for us got incredibly challenging. It's like the e-com channel became way more competitive. Meta ads stopped performing. It's like you threw out $1 and you were lucky if you got 80 cents, and you had to be really, really smart about those strategies if you wanted to see that return that people had previously more effortlessly seen in 2020. And then the inflation on the grocery shelves, I really remember in 2021, that was the thing that was the biggest challenge for us. Suddenly our cookies were like $1 more on most people's shelves, and we hadn't raised prices at all. It was like distributors were doing price increases, retailers were increasing their margin, everybody started suffering. And that's when, like, I think the great annihilation of brands and the pullback from venture capital actually started happening. And that became our toughest year, because we had just closed on a round. We had just brought in a team. We were doing all the things we discussed in that round about doing. And it was like overnight, the markets changed, and we had to immediately pivot. I mean, people we had brought in right after the close, we were letting them go 2-3 months after, some even less time frame than that, because it was that fast for us anyway, seeing the industry change. That was heartbreaking. That was a tough year.
Yeah. And at that point, you weren't vertical.
No.
Were you primarily, it sounds like you were doing a lot with e-com in those years. What was the business breakdown? It still had to be much more brick and mortar retail, right?
It
Versus
was, yeah.
e-com. Yeah.
Yeah, for us,
And
it always was. I think the biggest year, which was probably 2020, like maybe 25% of revenues were e-com. Whereas historically, we'd always been sub 10 was e-com, and still live sub 10 in e-com.
yeah,
But now for very different reasons, which we can get into later.
right. Okay. So, tough year in 21. It sounds like
Yeah.
you made some changes to internally within the business. I do want to get to product and how that has changed since you started it close to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But trying to get up to current day today. How about 2022? The next couple of years, how did the business change? And I think you started in LA, and now you're in Illinois. Talk us through that period and what was next.
Definitely. So those were, so they turned into some dark years. I will say, though, we have to be really grateful that we had supportive investors. We had some family offices that came in, and, they stepped up and put in some distressed capital in those years to keep us afloat. It was very risky for them. And when I took on that capital, I knew we had a really clear mandate, which is like, even one of the family investors is like, you got to just take this business down to the bones, basically. And that's really what those years became, is like, okay, this is a totally different world that we're playing in. It's not as easy. It is even harder. There's a major annihilation happening. We were seeing brands just disappear. These were like some iconic brands that were like, superstars at Expo West, and then suddenly they're just gone the next day. It was like, what world are we living in here? And I think a lot of people, it's easy to underplay this, but a lot of people were waiting for things to just normalize. And I was like, I just felt it in my bones. I'm like, we cannot just sit here and do the same thing, or we're just not going to be here. And, we got a little bit of capital from those family offices. I'm like, we have to fix this. We have to and basically it went back to, we got to learn, what have we learned about the category and where are our roots? And what we did, which is insane, well, I should say I did, I guess, at this point, is basically I went back to LA. I had a friend who had a vegan cafe in LA, and he was basically like, hey, if you want to explore some other concepts, I have this back room that I just like licensed for packaged consumer goods because I'm making a vegan yogurt product. He's like, go ahead and use it. And I basically, ran the business during the day, and at nights went there and was like formulating with different ideas and concepts. We started a little DoorDash Grubhub delivery service out of there where we started making fresh baked cookies and explored other concepts and one of the things that we created in that space was I always had thought like, oh, recreating a Little Debbie oatmeal cream sandwich would be just such an iconic move. And I felt like something that the category really needed. And having seen where the category had changed and what made it so difficult, to me, it was a no-brainer play, which is having something super differentiated. And it also played on all of the values that we had already instilled into the brand, because there is a nostalgia about those oatmeal cream sandwiches. There is something that feels very homemade about the Little Debbie brand. It feels artisanal. It feels like something that you want, that brings you back to your childhood, that connects you to family. So it played on that one pillar that we talked about before. And then we knew we'd interpret it for the Maxine's pillars, which are vegan, gluten-free, and no refined sugars. So it was just then about formulating that. But it played on something that we had developed well, which was shelf-stable soft-baked cookies. And it became this like interesting pivot. So we launched it as a concept idea in this trial kitchen, like in the end of 23, early 2024, and then ended up having this seminal moment, I guess, in the brand where we had a meeting with our Whole Foods buyer, because we already were in some regions in Whole Foods in February of 2024. And she's like, hey, I happened to be on your website before this meeting, which this is such a credit to that buyer. A lot of buyers walk into the meeting, they like haven't, done any pre-work. They haven't looked at your deck or anything, but she had diligently been on our website. She's like, I noticed that you have this like cream sandwich that you're only offering online. I don't have anything like in the category. I'm very interested. How fast could you commercialize this and launch it? And that conversation, which we can either keep going on or punt for later, that was like the most pivotal moment. And it reshaped, redefined, and gave an entirely new purpose to what the brand stands for, what products we're producing, and the growth trajectory we are now on, which is unlike anything we've seen in the past.
Yeah, and Robert, before the oatmeal cream sandwich, what was the product lineup that Maxine's was selling?
That's probably a good place we should have started, but we initially launched with soft baked cookies because that was the Maxine recipe. So we had and still do, we had flavors of soft baked oatmeal cookies. That was the big thing about Maxine's cookies. They always were very oat heavy. So we have like a cinnamon raisin, double chocolate, and peanut butter cookies that are all oat based. And then we have a line of crispy cookies as well. So a couple flavors of like thin and crispy cookies. So that was what we had before the launch of the cream sandwich. And having been through a lot of iterations and worked with a lot of really smart food scientists on shelf-stable soft-baked cookies, which are still very, very hard to find pretty much anywhere in the category. It's very hard to make a cookie that's soft, natural ingredients that lasts like 10 to 12 months in distribution. So that's what it was historically. That's what we sort of utilize as our special skill to pivot and launch the cream sandwiches.
So it basically you had your original product lineup, and then the aha was when you created the cookie sandwich, which was 5+ years into the journey, and it was after a lot of heartbreak and restructuring how you did things internally.
I basically summarized the hardest years in 30 seconds, and I probably should have spent a little more time on that because I cannot overstate how difficult those years between really, like I would say 2022 and that conversation in the beginning of 2024 were. It was some ruthless, brutal years where we thought, oh my God, is this going to even work? We were down to the studs as a business, and we were like holding on by threads.
This is a direct question, but why didn't you quit?
I know. I feel like so many people have asked me that. I don't know. I'm like, when I look back, it's like, I think any rational person would have just said, well, this is it. But I it was my first time like taking investment capital. My previous business was a nonprofit. So, if you lost money as a nonprofit, people expect that you're subsidizing losses for the mission. But in for profit, I'm like, these are people one is a really good friend that had invested, the first person to ever take a risk. We had venture capital. I just was like, I cannot let this fail. Like, this is not. I've gained the trust of these people. I've taken on their investment and trust, and I have to make this work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're early 2024. Whole Foods saw the product, requested it for their shelves. You talked about how difficult it is to make and scale, and you were in a kitchen in LA. I know you can't really scale to Whole Foods on that path. So can you explain how you've thought about manufacturing, since that moment in 2024 and how that's changed?
God. Yeah. Because wow, that's really where Johnny starts coming into the picture. It's a critical part of that pivot. But we said yes to this. So we're in this meeting with the Whole Foods Park, as you would do in a meeting. And sometimes I think I've gotten smart and learned better, and then sometimes I'm just as stupid as I was 10 years ago. But we're in this meeting, and we're basically like, we can totally commercialize it. 6 months. We're just like, pick 6 months out of our butts. We're just like, 6 months, and we'll commercialize this. And she's like, great, I'd love to launch it globally at all Whole Foods, 2 SKUs. And we're like, yeah, sounds good. Let's do it. 6 months. And it didn't know the first thing about soft baked cream sandwich cookies. That there is a reason why they don't exist on shelf other than Little Debbie. I mean, everyone has an Oreo because you can produce those pretty much so many different co-packers throughout the country. No one has a soft baked, cream sandwich cookie. And so we launched this thing, hand piping cookies. And I will never forget the first day, like we were like trying to we got the Whole Foods orders, and we're in the kitchen, and I'm like, what have I done? Like, we are never, ever going to be able, it's going to cost us like $7 a box to make these things. And we're never going to make money. And I just took like a bad problem and made it so much worse. Like, what have I done? And it's like, as you do though, and like, you end up learning, and like things got a little bit better. But we did try we launched this with contract manufacturers, and we tried for like a year and a half to make it work. But you cannot plug this product into contract manufacturers. And this is about the time that I got connected through Johnny, through a colleague who was like, hey, you should talk to Johnny. He's like, we hadn't really long, like, it was right before we were launching with Whole Foods. We had a good sense that this would probably do well, but no real certainty on that. And Johnny and I actually just initially talked to be like, hey, is there a different concept we can do with the business where we merge with some other struggling businesses and like try to create scale and efficiency by like bringing businesses together? And that was the context I met Johnny. And then he was there when we launched the cream sandwiches, and we're like struggling to figure out like where to produce these. And then he's like, I'll let him tell this part of the story, but he had been like deal sourcing for someone. And he's like, hey, there's this space. Maybe like co-man is not the route for this product. There's just never going to be a future with that. What do you think about this space? And, can let him do some talking, but that's essentially where he got involved.
Enter Johnny.
Yeah. I mean, there was definitely that timing for Robert's like description of the annihilation period of CPG from 2021 through 2025. I was pretty on the front lines with that, with a bunch of different founders, like helping them figure out what to do with their businesses. They were looking to either wind down or merge or do something along those lines. And so I did a fair amount of transactions with founders as well as some investor groups on that side of it. And in one of those, it was with a family office that was looking to purchase a manufacturing facility in the Midwest. And so I had just kind of semi-recently done a full search for them across a bunch of different co-mans, looking at all their businesses, doing site visits, all that kind of stuff. So there was this one in Decatur, Illinois that I really loved. It was on 10 acres of land. It was a 40,000 square foot facility. It had tons of equipment because it was kind of set up as a pet project for ADM, which is a massive ingredient manufacturer for like soy and corn. And so they had a ton of great equipment, a lot of really amazing infrastructure, but just the business hadn't really grown and withstood a lot of that annihilation, because even like brands struggled, but co-mans really struggled, right? Like their top clients would leave and just go under. They would switch around. Ingredient costs rose, labor costs rose. So a lot of these co-mans are struggling, and so that family office ended up going with another one that I had sourced for them. But this one, just kind of continued to exist. And around the time we had gone through our third co-man with Maxine's, trying to figure out how to produce this product that no one could seem to make. That was when I was like, why don't we hit up these people and see if they're still kind of on the market? And it was pretty fortuitous at the time. They were actually about to shut down their doors. And so we kind of caught them in July. They said next month we're shutting down the doors. And I was like, what if we worked on kind of a lease to buy situation? We can step in, give you guys all the co-man business you could ever need with Maxine's. You've got most of what we need. We'll have to get a couple pieces of equipment, and then we can work towards purchasing the asset. And so, we kind of ironed out a lot of the details through the rest of that year. And then December 8th was when it was full steam ahead, where Robert and I figured out why all these co-mans were failing at making our product, because probably for 2 to 3 months we were failing at making it as well. So it was definitely it was a struggle.
Yeah. What is it about the process that is so difficult? Does it require a specific type of equipment? Yeah. What is it?
Yeah, without sharing too much details on what we learned, it's just there's a lot of steps to the process. So you're talking about from start to finish. You're talking about like batching and making cookies, which is the normal process. And most cookies brand, that's where they end. They just go from there to packaging. But we have to have a cooling process, a process by which the cookies get creamed. They got to get recooled again, and then they have to be packaged. And a lot of the equipment that's out there, that standardized equipment that exists in a lot of co-mans, are really built for sturdier cookies. Like that's why you have Oreos. And crispy cookie sandwiches, because they can withstand a lot of that production process without breakage and without issues, and they're a little bit more resilient. So you're putting a pretty fragile product through a not so fragile manufacturing process, and we didn't, we also didn't have crazy automations. And I think Johnny's a little underselling the pivotal part that he played in this, because like aside from finding that facility, like Johnny was really one of the first believers when he started seeing the data on the cream sandwiches, and went from like advising on a soft landing for the brand to like actually being like, I'm going to put some of my own personal resources into supporting this facility transition, because we'd both seen like there is no future on co-man. So we both ended up putting some personal resources, because we couldn't quite convince our investors. I mean, no hard feelings, because I'm not sure I would at that point either, but they weren't convinced on the vertical integration piece. And so we're like, hey, we will put our own personal resources there. We will start this sublease. We will take the risk and figure out how to get this thing scaled and create a path toward scale and exit on this at this facility. And we did that beginning in December. And we definitely had a couple of dark months in those first months where we were like, what did we do? Why are we making this more complicated? So,
the past 6 months has probably felt like 6 years just in every single week. It's like a new learning. It's a new milestone. And we've gone from back when in December, we had like maybe 10 people on staff at the facility. We're at 40 full time now. And it's been a lot to, get the right team in place, get the right process in place, to where we're not just like burning cash and inefficiencies. And the business has been profitable since, which is great. It's just more of like there's a lot of things we had to learn and undo and fix to get us to the point where we're like stable and things are growing and it's exciting. But the manufacturing process for this isn't straightforward.
And we've had the just pressure on the other. So we went from being like, where are the POs? Like, what's happening to the brand, to like having a full-on anxiety attack when the POs would come, because with the products, which we haven't really talked about, is like after that launch, it really completely redefined the brand. And we saw this is what a truly category leading product looks like in terms of velocities, in terms of consumer adoption, in terms of like organic virality that was happening around these products, like as soon as we launched them, and pretty much everywhere we've launched them since. So all the while that we're like vertical integrating, we're up against like enormous pressures of growth as like more and more consumers get behind it. And we're actually at a point right now in this year where I never thought I would have this problem, where we're kind of like with retailers, unless you're in 2027 on a relaunch, like we can't entertain any more 2026 business until we get fully up and running on some automations that will help us meet the demand. So it's
right.
really
Those are the best kind of problems, though, to be dealing with when you can't fulfill retailer orders. So very, very interesting on the vertical side. I can imagine why investors had a hard time wrapping their heads around it as you were building out that concept. And honestly, I was one of them. I've had a lot of questions about how you're doing it, why you're doing it, and it is rare. But we know the challenges of it. Can we talk about the opportunities that you can now pounce on, knowing that you have this in your back pocket, because it does make you more powerful if you can figure it out. So.
Definitely.
It does. And I want Johnny to answer some of those things or lay into some of that. But I would say I always start when people are like, why vertical integration? Like the thing that I always like to say, and Johnny's probably tired of hearing this, but it's like, I always say, whenever anyone asks that, it's like, I always start with, if we could have done anything else, we would have. We had absolutely no interest in vertical integration. The last thing I wanted to do was take a complicated life and make it more complicated by owning a manufacturing facility and having to deal with that. And if we thought there was any other path toward the realization of this scale of this product, we would have taken it. But
there was we tried literally everything prior to this, from setting up our own small kitchen in LA that was a little bit more substantial than what was there previously, to multiple different co-mans, to buying some equipment at some of our co-mans and having them work with it. And there's the lack of ability to control the process, to control the schedule, to do the things that we needed to do when we're adding an extra $100,000 in revenue on the gross, like on our gross revenues every single month. You can't keep up that way. And so we ended up having to kind of resort to that. But through that whole process of the year and a half of discovery on the co-man side, I think what we realized was going to be one of our main assets is this moat that we're kind of building around on the supply chain side, where I think it'll take them a while to figure out what we've been able to figure out over the past couple of years in setting up the vertical integration. And so it kind of gives us a bit of a head start on this differentiation we're setting up, as well as kind of where we see the business going in the next few years. But other opportunities too, the facility came with tons of amazing equipment. So we have a fully separate bar line where we co-manufacture for bar products like nutrition bars, snack bars, protein bars that we have to offset our overhead in general. So we've got 2 lines running now at the facility, the Maxine's line and the protein bar line. And so that just leaves opportunity for improved gross margin, ability to have some flexibility around innovation on the Maxine side, and just more further control. Also on the freight side of things, like we have all fulfillment going in and out of Decatur, which is a centrally located space. So all distributor, and then soon we should have all e-com stuff as well after the summer months clear. It's been opening up just a lot of doors, and we're only occupying 1 of the 10 acres that we have. So there's lots of room to grow as we continue to scale this business.
And the other thing that has been really, I think, critical in this process is like that speed to innovation with Whole Foods was like such a brand defining moment for us. And we wouldn't have been able to do that if we hadn't. It was actually when we had this sort of LA space that we were able to make that happen. And I think that really instilled in us like, hey, there's an opportunity to be an innovation partner for retailers, because they really are. There are a lot of buyers that want that have concepts, ideas, flavor ideas, exclusive partnership ideas. And being a partner that can kind of deliver on that pretty quickly is a major asset, and you get very good buy-in from buyers for that. And we've been able to do that with some of these early test launches, and that is a very time-consuming and expensive path with co-mans. To be like, hey, make the same flavor over and over is like great, easy on a co-man route. But if you're like, hey, but now I want to throw in this quick little seasonal thing, or I want to make this change, or in the early case of launching this brand, we had to figure out like what made it better, more shelf stable, how to make it more consistent. And that required a lot of formulation changes, process changes. That does not suit well for co-mans. Every time you do that, you disrupt the process, you disrupt margins for them, you add a lot of undesirable costs. And we just knew like there's too much like micro adjustments that are going to happen, that we need that in our control, where we're not breaking the bank every time we want to make the product better or pivot slightly.
Yeah. So there's a lot to get to here. We've barely even talked about product and like what you're seeing in the market, but we've got limited time left here. I would love to sit on product and brand for a minute, because we haven't gone too deep there. The byline on the brand right now, if you go to the website, it's homemade style cookies sweetened by nature. Mm-hmm. So can you start with the sweetened by nature piece of this? What does that mean from what comes to life in your products?
So that's that second pillar about natural sugars, which we think is kind of the heartbeat of the brand. There's a lot, there was a period, thank God it's not as crazy right now, where there's like the zero sugar keto world that, as I know, has been distressed. But there was that world, and then there was like organic cane sugar. And then we didn't like either of those worlds. We felt like the real consumer choice that's in the center that is more exciting is like just sugar conscious. Like if you're going into the cookie category and you're going to eat cookies or treats or whatever it comes, you know that you're not eating vegetables or a salad, right? Like you want, and you're looking for an experience. And what we found is like people either ditch that experience or lately they're either ditching that experience or they're not willing to sacrifice for like a secondary taste standards just because it meets their dietary preferences. Like it's like 2026, we get what we want whenever we want it in the world now. It's like that means if I'm gonna eat a dessert, it's got to taste amazing. And in that world, in between like keto and just like organic cane sugar, lives this amazing world of unrefined sugars, where these are things that are minimally processed and as close to nature as possible. So the process of like refining and making coconut sugar is like 6 steps less than refined cane sugar. And to us, that's that ode to sweetened by nature. It's like this is the product as close to as Mother Nature intended it as it was presented to us in this world. And we believe that when you follow that, when you're as close to the original as possible, the less processing you go through, the less harmful it is for the body, the more easy it is for your body to recognize it, deal with it, process it. Like, for example, it's like dates come with fiber. Most sugars in nature come with fiber. And inherently, it slows down that digestion process, helps you to process the sugar. You don't have sugar spikes and sugar crashes after. So that's that sweetened by nature component. And homemade style is the tribute to Maxine's and the North Star that we always want, which is nostalgic treats. It needs to feel like that feeling of when cookies came out of an oven for every life event. It needs to, even though it's shelf stable, it needs to not feel manufactured, but like it was made from a kitchen. So homemade style is pillar 1, sweetened by nature is pillar 2.
And is in your mind, as long as the product is sitting within those 2 pillars, that's something that Maxine's could potentially release.
And that's why the cream sandwiches made sense, because it answered both those calls. We still did the coconut sugar and dates avenue on the cream sandwiches, and we still had the homemade style, which was these things taste very fresh, super soft, just like you experienced in Little Debbie, and kind of just like you would taste when you make them at your own home. And any future products would always have to follow that line. Now we've sort of opened up this like Pandora's box of like what future products could be. And we have so many internal ideas we're exploring right now, including some iterations that have gone back with some major retailers on exclusive launches of like the next cream sandwich product type that we'd launch. But it plays in that same world. And it would be another product you go, oh my God, I love that from my childhood. You recognize it instantly, and it has all those same attributes of being sweetened by nature and super clean ingredients, vegan and gluten-free.
Yeah, and leaning into nostalgia and that connection, that emotional connection.
Always.
And it's funny, you basically, almost all the new snack cookie launches that I see are now packed with protein. Is Maxine's a protein? No, I see you shaking
So
your
we
head.
are I feel very, very firm about, like, we are not, we used to be an attribute first brand. And I think in this pivot, we realized that is not our play. Our play is being a taste first brand with permissible, clean ingredients that allow you to have an experience first. Functionality, for us, like, there's a lot of plays that work where people just chase functionality or chase trends. But to us, that's a fickle journey. It changes quickly. Consumer habits change. Everyone could stop caring about protein tomorrow. And what happens if you built your entire brand around protein? The resilient legacy brands that I think reach like extreme audiences are the ones that are everlasting and are built on some authenticity. I think brands that build on attributes only, you just don't have legs to stand on if those attributes suddenly are not in favor. So no, we will never have at least not in the near future, we will not have a functional cookie play. We will not be having a protein play. I still eat a protein cookie every once in a while. That's not this brand.
Fair enough. And I think I agree with you. It can work, but also for the most part, when people are looking for cookies and indulgence, that's what they're looking for. And taste always reigns supreme in all of CPG.
And you need to know what you stand for. And that's at least that's what we're trying to deliver to consumers, is like that desire to recreate nostalgic experiences with ingredients that you feel really passionately about, where you go, yeah, this is super clean and I really appreciate this ingredient deck. But what I'm chasing when I go to this brand is that experience when I bite into the cookie and I go, oh my God, that's like takes me right back, or that really like satisfies this moment, or it makes this moment feel really special. That's what we're focused on, not like, and now I got my protein fix.
Great. So to wrap, would love to hear about the future path and really what you both have in mind for the future of this brand. I know that in right now in 2026, there's a ton of growth happening, a lot of retailers coming on board, distribution exploding, and we'll talk about that in a follow-up conversation. But let's think a little bit longer term with the close here. And Robert, I know this has been the journey of a lifetime for you and seemingly your life's work. So yeah, what are you going to do with this thing? And when do you know it's time to hang it up? Because it seems like you don't quit. So
I'm not really good at quitting, for sure. Well, we've just been thrilled with like the way these products have been received. I mean, when from velocity benchmarks, like wherever we've gone, from natural to some limited conventional tests to even the recent test at mass with Target, these things have just like unlocked this this group of consumers that are so passionate about the products, and like it's so rewarding to see that feedback come in, and it's reinvigorated, I think, like my own involvement in this brand, because it's like now it's fun to see the level of engagement, the success we're seeing, the buy-in from buyers, the buy-in from consumers. So we have this great responsibility in the short term to meet that demand, because right now, like, we haven't been able to pace and keep up, and everything that we're doing on this raise is actually about being able to meet that demand and to keep that fire going, to keep that excitement going, and to be good supply chain partners. So everything in the next like 6 to 12 months is about how do we scale up the infrastructure to really invest in this concept. In parallel with that is how does this become a legacy brand, and how do we maintain that leadership in terms of where we're pivoting the category, because that's what I think we're doing right now is redefining like a new age in this cookie category. That's about like stronger taste experience products, nostalgia, and differentiation. And so there's a lot of internal conversations around like future products, brand positioning, some brand rebranding projects that are all about securing that place as the leader of like the future of this category, and taking it to a mass scale. That's Johnny can weigh more in on that in terms of how we turn that into a legacy brand, scale it up, and then give it a path for liquidity for everyone who's been on a pretty insane journey with us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have a unique opportunity with what we've unlocked on the cream sandwich line and the path to market there and the success it's had. Where last year, in the total year, we spent almost like $8,000 in marketing in total. So, and then this year we've spent even less. We're filling probably 40 to 50% of orders at this point. Hopefully, we're trying to get that to 90% plus by the end of this year. And even just meeting that alone is going to be a massive feat. But that allows us to focus on different things, right? Like we're able to lean in on product, able to lean in on category defining, moments and things that will shape where we're going and where we end up, and eventually, who's gonna want to pull, Maxine's into the future of what it really could be at a very massive scale. So I think that's the exciting thing that we have in front of us, is that the cream sandwiches are doing really, really well. And there's probably a very large business. I mean, if you just look at like Nature's Bakery, for example, that's a massive business, and they have these fruit-filled bars, and there's like 5 flavors, and it's just pack variations, right? Like cream sandwiches could very well be that. And then some. There's so much more for this platform to be had that we're really excited to take on.
Well said. And guys, congratulations on just making it through to this point. I know how difficult this is, so give you a lot of credit just for staying in the game and getting to a point where you've unlocked this flagship product that's really resonating with people. And it's like we've talked about, it's a great problem to have where you can't fulfill orders and demand. So very excited to watch this continue and support its growth over the next few years. So well done. Thanks for coming on. It's been really cool to hear your story.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for giving us a platform to talk about it. Yeah, and for the support you've given us.